I have always dreaded borders, and I don't mean the bookstore, but those artificial lines between countries that separate people from people. Back in the 1970s, I began to travel in earnest, and it was then that I first met up with borders. Now, our own borders were relatively simple affairs. But when I went for the first time to a communist police state, that was an altogether different thing. I had heard the reputation of those borders, and it terrified me. I was traveling then with an old lady. I've always enjoyed the company of old ladies. She noticed my fear as we approached the border, and she reassured me, "Don't worry, I'll take care of everything. You'll be fine." Well, the train pulled into the border station, and standing all around were heavily armed soldiers and policemen, many of them carrying huge machine guns and accompanied by ferocious dogs. I was shaking with fear. Remember, I was very young at that time. I'm still very young. The old woman took me by the hand and led me up to the customs official. He was about to look through my bags when she flung open her own suitcase and she said, "Uncle Joe," or "What's your name?" He said, "Steve is my name." "Uncle Steve," she said, "look at these wonderful things I have in my suitcase. Look at these beautiful new silk stockings I'm bringing from Austria. Here, take half of them for your wife. And do you have children?" "Yes, I have 2 children." "Well, look at this candy. I'm sure your kids will love it. And look what I brought for you." With that, she pulled out a bottle of what we would call fire water. Uncle Steve licked his lips. Then she closed her suitcase and he turned to search through mine. Now, I knew I had many things in there they wouldn't like, including religious clothing and some books that would have been quite suspicious there. I probably could have gone to prison for some of that. He gestured towards my suitcase and started to ask me to open it. She put her hand on his and said, "Don't worry, Uncle, he's with me. There's nothing in there. Come on." And she took me by the hand, and we went right through the guards. That was my first experience with the terror of a border and a border guard being terrorized by an old woman. I've always been just a bit terrified of crossing borders. In more recent years, I was relieved to see that within the community of Europe, those borders have in many places all but disappeared, so that often one can travel from one country to the next without seeing one policeman, without seeing one soldier, without seeing one gun or one dog, without seeing any border patrol, any passport control, any customs officials. It's like traveling between California and Nevada without the casinos. When I was in Berlin a few years ago, my friend John was driving me from Berlin to Dresden, a city I had always wanted to see. And because we were talking, we became distracted and missed the exit. All of a sudden, he said to me, "I hate to tell you this, but we are now in Poland." We had crossed the border without even knowing it, and it was a delightful surprise. In life, some borders and some boundaries are necessary, of course. But sometimes we put borders, we put boundaries, we put limits on our own love. What's even worse is that sometimes we try to put borders, limits on God's love. God's love has no borders, no limits. Today we hear of a Canaanite woman, a pagan, a non-Jew, someone who did not worship in the accepted way. Yet she came and asked Jesus for a favor. She was not of his people. She was not of his religion. Her people worshiped other gods. But she was a human being in need. Her daughter needed Jesus' healing touch, so she asked him for his help. At first sight, Jesus' reply to her may seem harsh. His reply reflected the arrogance of the common attitude of those days, reflected the arrogance of the common attitude of almost all days. He told her he had been sent to a certain people, and she didn't belong to that people. Now, Jesus knew that his mission was to come to the house of Israel, and that soon he would send out his followers to bring that same light to the other peoples. But that time had not yet arrived. He knew the plan. He knew the principle. And she didn't fit into it. "I was only sent to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. I'm sorry." Oh, but the woman kept on insisting. "But I need your help, Lord." Now, Jesus didn't have any problems with foreigners. He didn't have problems with people of other religions. We will remember when the pagan officer came to him earlier because the beloved boy who had been taking care of him was now dying. Jesus gave his help and praised the faith of this pagan. When he spoke to the Samaritan woman at the well, he had no problem with her being from a different people or a different religion, a different understanding of God. He saw only a human being in need, and he was there for her. No, Christ had no problems with people from other religions. But in this case, he wanted to teach his followers an important lesson. So he said to her what he had been hearing from them. He said, "It's not right to take the food from the kids sitting at the table and give it to the little puppies underneath. As beloved as those little puppies might be to the household, they're not the children sitting at the table. And so you don't fit into this." But she insisted even more. He wanted to give her that opportunity to show the apostles the great faith which could come from a person of another religion, of another culture, of another people. And so she said, "But even the little puppies under the table can eat from the scraps. There is enough there for all of us." Then Jesus smiled and said what he had been wanting to say. "What great faith you have." He held her up as an example to his own people who didn't have half the faith she did. You want to see real faith? Look to this woman. And he cured her. We like to think we're the only ones, just as Jesus' own people back then thought that they were the only ones whose prayers could possibly be answered. They thought they were the only ones who understood God. And indeed, they probably understood some things about God which other peoples did not. But they were not the only ones whose prayers were precious to God. Just like we are not the only ones who are precious in the eyes of God. The lesson of this story is that God's love has no borders, no limits, no bounds. God's love is infinite. Jesus knew the plan and he knew the principles. But Jesus loved people better than principles. And his attitude was wonderfully echoed many centuries later by Oscar Wilde, who said, "I like people better than principles, and I like people without principles better than anything else in the world." The love of God is there for all. The Christ came to show us the face of God in himself. But if God chooses to show the divine face to another person in another way, who are we to place limits on the limitless love of God? The 1980s are not generally considered a period of great spiritual enlightenment. But there was one extraordinary event which took place on October 27th, 1986, in the beautiful city of Assisi, the home of St. Francis, that great apostle of peace. On that day, religious leaders from all over the world, from all the different faiths, came together for the first time in history and prayed together for peace. This was, I am proud to say, at the invitation of the Catholic Pope. There stood the Pope, the various patriarchs, the Archbishop of Canterbury, the Dalai Lama, Jewish rabbis, Muslim imams, representatives from the various religions and tribes of Africa and America, Buddhist and Hindu leaders, all coming together to pray together. Who are we to say that we are the only ones whose prayers God hears? There is divine love enough for all of us. Love knows no boundaries, no borders, no limits. Let us stop putting borders, limits, conditions on our love for one another. And most especially, let us stop putting borders, limits, conditions on God's boundless love for us.